Ranger mic. My name's Corinna. I'm an occupational therapist and I'm based down at the Helen Allison School, which is a National Autistic Society school in Kent. That's part of my job. I also run my own business but also see lots of other children outside of the school in a private capacity for occupational therapy. Just waiting for a few more people to come in. You're right. Yeah? Okay. So we're going to talk about sensory strategies today, and the idea is that hopefully you're going to go away from this afternoon with some practical sort of suggestions that you can put into place without spending a fortune, because I know budgets are rubbish, aren't they now? So hopefully this should give you some fairly cheap and sometimes completely free resources that you guys can use out there with your students in schools. Most of you, I presume, are teachers, majority people teachers? Yeah? Some parents? Any parents? Excellent, okay, good. And therapists? Any OTs? No? Shame. Okay. So why occupational therapy? One thing I do know is that occupational therapists with postgraduate training in sensory integration are quite rare out there and often not available on the NHS. I don't know if people have come across that. It seems that people or students with autism are only just starting to hit the waiting lists for OT in the NHS. So, but it's important, I think, that we see these kids, and this is why. 60 to 70% of children with autism also have a coordination disorder, be that in fine motor or gross motor. So you'll see the children that, you know, problems with handwriting, problems with movement-based activities. It's because 70% of them have that as well. And Green, who's a really good autism researcher, actually said that she feels that 90% of students with ASD have a motor coordination disorder of some description or another. So that's a hugely high proportion. So we're looking at occupational therapy not just from the sensory side of things, but also from the motor processing side of things as well. Some simple neuroscience. It is simple because that's about what I can cope with. Temple Grandin, everybody recognise Temple Grandin there? Very famous adult with autism, fantastic author, and does lots of work in the veterinary field as well. Now they've recently scanned her brain. They've recently started scanning a lot of adults with autism's brains to look at the differences in the brain, how it's made. There are differences. You can see that on her brain here. The neurotypical brain is at the bottom, her brain is at the top. What are the differences? The main differences, as I'm interested in, are the differences in the amygdala, which is our flight or fight response system in our brain. That lets us know when something's okay and we don't need to run away from it, and when something's not and it really is properly dangerous. That's not working so well because it's enlarged in our population of people with autism. So therefore that fight or flight often kicks in far too quickly or inappropriately as we'd see it in the neurotypical world. The other interesting thing is there's weak connections in the Broca's area, which is the speech processing area, and also more neurons in the visual area. Well, we all know these children are often very, very visual learners, visual everything. So that just makes sense. It makes what we thought make sense. Another study in America, most of the studies are in America, but another study in America has talked about how people on the autistic spectrum are slow to process senses. So what happens is the senses will come into the brain will start to process what's going on. Is it a light, is it a sound, is it okay? And then another sense comes in, and then another sense comes in, and another sense comes in, and they haven't processed the first one yet, and then you see meltdown. So this is another good thing, you know, proves what we thought all along. So Jean Ayres, if anybody was an occupational therapist in the room, they would have heard of Jean Ayres. She's kind of our sensory guru. And if anybody wants to read any of her books, they are really good books. She wrote them way back in the sort of 50s, 60s. But what she was saying back then is still current and relevant now. And what she was predicting was happening to these children has now been proved in the neuroscience world. So she's quite an amazing lady, really. But she's talking about the senses coming into the brain, kind of like a set of traffic lights or at a junction, and then neurotypical people will sort it out and go in the right filter lane and go around the right junction, whereas people that have got sensory processing disorders, it all gets jammed up and it gets stopped. in the wrong place and doesn't get filtered out properly. So it's those filtering parts that are often a bit disorganised. So as occupational therapists, and other therapists too, and as teachers, I'm sure it's exactly what you're trying to do, is you're trying to get your students in the happy bit, in the middle. That's where we'd all like our students to be. That's where we'd all like to be. No one's there all the time. It's absolutely impossible to be there all the time. Sometimes you'll see your students, the more sort of lethargic students that need a bit of a, buzz to get up and go. And then you'll see the other end of the spectrum where they're absolutely flying, and as we had yesterday at school, trying to break glass and trying to get out of the school. So both ends, what we're trying to do is trying to keep these students and us in the middle, and that's what some of these strategies will hopefully try and do, because the only place that we can learn effectively is in that middle space. We can't learn if we're unalert, flopped on the table, not really listening, and we also can't learn if everything's just bombarding us and we can't possibly concentrate on what the teacher's saying if we're trying to deal with our own inner anxieties. I know Sarah is going to talk about anxiety later on today, but I have to say, and it's something that I would like to say a lot, is to remember that our students are in a high state of anxiety most of the time. Not just a bit when you see it as the behaviour, but most of the time they are trying to cope with one anxiety or another. To us, it may not seem like a relevant anxiety, but it is very relevant to them. And so they are always in a state of anxiety, and they'll just move through the day in different states of anxiety. So just dealing with one thing doesn't mean to say that for the rest of the day these kids are going to be fine, because they're not, because something else will happen and it will bring their anxiety levels up again. We're going to talk today about the 7 senses. So your 5 normal senses, your sight, sound, smell, touch and taste, and then your 2 really, really important senses, your balance, which is also known as your vestibular sense, and then your position in space sense, which is known as proprioception. We're going to go through every single one of those, and we're going to look at behaviours you may see in the classroom, at home, wherever, and some simple strategies to put in place that will hopefully reduce those behaviours. I'm very aware that I've got my back to you guys all the time, I'm sorry. Okay. What I want you to do first, because what I find in these sessions is you guys out there have got huge amounts of experience and know a lot of this already, hopefully. And what I'd like you to do in your groups is think of a situation where you may have felt frightened, anxious, overwhelmed, nervous, what you did to calm yourselves down, and how long it took to feel calm after that event. For example, an extreme event would be having a car accident. How long does it take for your system to calm down after that? Or, like me, who's getting on a bit now, and when I go on spinny vestibular rides at the fairground, I feel sick for about 4 hours afterwards, which really annoys my kids, because I'm like, no, I can't do that one. You're going to have to take your dad on that one. So what coping strategies do you use? If you can't think of anything yourself, think of, students, people you've met, your own children, or whatever. What's triggered their anxiety or their sensory overload, and what strategy you've put in place. And then at the end, when we've gone through it all, I want to go around and I just want to see if anybody's come up with anything that I haven't mentioned, because then it's another resource for you all to use, because you all will have your own resources out there, simple things that you've thought of that have worked really well for you or for your students. And I think it's a good opportunity at these conferences for everyone to share all of their knowledge as well, so we all go away with as much as possible. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, that's all, to have a quick chat and see what you can come up with for the end. Can I just say that I know everyone probably still wants to carry on talking about their incidents. When I said to you about me going on spinny rides, taking me 4 hours to get over that now, it never used to be like that. My vestibular system has aged. But just bear that in mind when you have a child that's having a meltdown or an incident of a behaviour incident or whatever at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The incident that triggered that might have been at 9 o'clock in the morning, might have been the night before. Don't just assume that because you couldn't see a behavioural trigger instantly to that behaviour that there wasn't one. Almost always there is some trigger, but you have to really investigate and put your detective hats on and go right back and speak to everybody that's been with that child, speak to the parents, find out what's happened, And often you'll find something happened from what we feel is a long time ago, but actually it's just taken that time to process. Remember, children are taking longer to process things, and that can be hours. So when they have their classic 2:30 meltdown, which seems to be the classic time, have a look back and see what happened in the morning, because it may well be related to that, not what just happened in the playground, which everybody thought wasn't really that bad. We'll go back to this at the end. Okay, so we're going to start with the auditory system, which is our sound system. So we're not talking about whether you've got a hearing problem or whether you need hearing aids or anything. What we're talking about is sensitivity to sound. Everybody has a different limit of their sensitivities to sound, but without, this is what allows us to communicate within the classroom to hearing students. Temple Grandin, which I think is very good, says, "My hearing is like having a hearing aid with the volume control stuck on super loud. It's impossible for autistic students to concentrate in the classroom if he is bombarded with noises that blast through his brain like a jet engine." Now, when she's saying that, she's not talking about loud noises particularly. She's talking about what we perceive as everyday noises. So things like the chairs scraping on the floor in the classroom, the two people whispering in the corner together over there, muttering or giggling, the man mowing the lawns outside, somebody coming down the road 2 miles away, or somebody walking up and down in the corridor. These can be very, very distracting for these students and painful. I can't reiterate that enough. Some of these students are feeling these extrasensory things as pain. So this is some of the behaviours you'll see from these students. If there's a fire drill or if the class is loud, they will sit there and cover their ears. They will often run out of loud areas. They won't even go in them because they can hear them from a long way away. They will complain about things like insects on the window or something that's happening a little while away. They'll complain that everybody else is yelling when actually they're not. They're using a normal tone of voice. Cafeterias, gyms, swimming pools, it's all nice and tall buildings where that sound is just too much for them. They will often hum or sing to themselves, and I know I have lots of teachers that say one of the bugbears is their students humming to themselves when the class is happening or when things are going on, and I often explain to them that humming, it may be annoying for us, but for that student it's their way of controlling the noise. It's their way of blocking out the other noises around them that they are finding uncomfortable. So they will hum because it's their noise, it's controlled noise. And they can concentrate quite well, thank you, in fact much better with that humming. And they will often talk louder than anyone else, again, to take that control. They will run out of the toilet if the toilet flushes. Now, toileting with children with autism, I think there's a parallel talk going on about that now, but there is a lot of sensory areas around that, and auditory system being one of them. Toilets are pretty noisy places, all that flushing going on, and what with the invention of those lovely new air blast hand dryers that do my head in, so I don't know how anybody that's got a sensitivity to sound copes, they're a nightmare. So you'll have students that don't go to the toilet all day, wet themselves, all that sort of stuff, because actually the toilet is a really uncomfortable environment. So that's one thing that you can think about in schools, that if that student's finding that area difficult, be it the smell, which we'll talk about later, because school toilets never smell nice, or be it the sounds, could they not use the staff toilet? Would that be so bad? Okay, so what can you do? Give warnings ahead of time. So if you are a school that has fire drills regularly on every first Monday of the month, I know they're meant to be a surprise, because I know they're meant to be checking that you can all get the kids in and out safely. But if you're going to have a child that's going to have an incident for the rest of the day because you've had a fire drill, let them know, warn them in advance, put it on your visual timetable. I'm sure you've heard before, visual is the key for these kids. So if you're going to have a fire drill, it's on the timetable. They can see it's going to happen. It will just help, won't get rid of it, to reduce that anxiety a little bit. If you know, like I can hear this buzzing, and some other people might be able to hear this buzzing, and some people now will be able to hear it buzzing because I've just alerted you to the sound. That's going to annoy someone. You can hear something up there, yeah. Sit them away from the sound as much as you can. Ear defenders. So these are, you know, some children will wear them, some children won't. But don't just go and get one set of cheap ear defenders, so one size fits all, because it doesn't. Everybody's comfortable in different things. So at school we have a drawer full of all different types of ear defenders that we pick up from all around the place. These ones tend to be one of the more popular ones, which I picked up from, we have like an army show around our way once a year in Kent, so I picked these. These are just ex-army pelter ear defenders. The boys don't mind these because they're ex-army and they're quite cool, so they're really good. Speaking at last conference, I was actually to Phoebe Caldwell. I don't know if anybody spoke or knows Phoebe, but she's been talking about these new Bose comfort ear defenders, which are made for listening to music. They're noise cancellation headphones, which is all the rage apparently now. I'd never heard of them, but I'm not very techie. So, but if you go into somewhere like John Lewis or somewhere, go on.
We quite often use with students something called attenuated earplugs.
Yep.
Quite often used by musicians, and they spend a little time with the music department and try and work out which frequencies are the ones that cause the most distress. And you change the little plugs in the end so that you reduce that frequency. They're 14 quid.
Now that is a brilliant idea, absolutely fantastic, because the Bose headphones are £300. So that sounds much better to me, but some children don't like things in their ears, but that is a really, really good idea. If you've got a music department too that can tweak the frequencies, brilliant. You can get the Bose ones for £150 on Amazon, but if you go into anywhere like John Lewis, if you can get your students in anywhere like that, they're always out and they've got a big display cabinet because they're so expensive, I suppose, and you can actually sit and listen to them, and they put jet engine noises on, and you can put them on and just play with them and flick the switch to turn the background noises out. But some students are finding those very useful. If you've got students who throw things around the room, then probably not at 300 quid. But some families are quite happy to go and buy that as a Christmas present because it works. They can also listen to music through them, but that's a really good idea too. Be aware, again, of certain situations that will trigger, like we were saying, will trigger an incident like your fire alarms, but also things like school buses, they're never quiet. Dining rooms, they're never quiet either, and things like that. So try and reduce that as much as you can. So an idea for the dining room is, you get the felt pads to put under chairs for wooden floors, so they don't scratch the wooden floors. IKEA, I live in IKEA. I don't know whether you've got one around here, but they sell them. They're very so cheap, £1 a packet. Stick them on underneath all the chairs, so when the chairs move, they don't scrape on the floor. It really reduces that sound down. Another school I went into didn't have anything anywhere near an IKEA or anywhere that sold them at the time. It was a while back, so they just cut tennis balls and just put them under the chairs, which were really noisy chairs. It really works. It really brings the noise down in that classroom. But also be aware of places that you can go if you're out and about. Sanctuary areas are something I absolutely love, and I think every child should have access to a sanctuary area at all times in their life when they're being overloaded. But if you're out and about, changing rooms in some department stores and stuff are quite quiet. They might look at you a bit oddly, but I'm sure if you march in there with a child, sit them down, and when you've got time you can come out and just explain to them, is it okay? We've done it quite a bit in our local shopping centre, and most places, Next are really good about it actually, are okay with you just going into a changing area, shutting the curtains and just being quiet, and then you can come out and explain to the lady that's asking you how many garments you've got as your child's screaming and you're going in. So anywhere quiet like that, but every classroom should have a sanctuary area for these kids, or a room, it's an ideal world, a room off the classroom, not time out, not a punishment, but a way for these kids to get away from everything that's overwhelming them and refocus. So pop-up tents, they're fantastic if you haven't got a room for the younger kids. For the older kids, we often will do something like you've got here. So it's got a table. We just chuck a big blanket over the table and they can just go underneath the table. Works really well. Think about what you want to put under there, a duvet and some fiddly toys or whatever helps that student to just regroup and come back down again. If you've got a room off the side of the classroom, even better, but pop-up tents and a blanket over the table work just as well. Listen to background music, going back to what you were saying about different frequencies, and there are different frequencies will be more uncomfortable than other frequencies. Low frequency sounds often tend to be actually the more uncomfortable. So they're like the Hoover, those sort of noises, those sort of low frequency sounds. But if you're going to give a child an MP3 player, which we use a lot for our older students, don't dictate to them what music's going on that MP3 player. Because, okay, you might think they must have Mozart because that's calming and rhythmical and that'll be perfect. It might not be perfect for them. They might like Metallica. So whatever is calming for them, allow them to have that on their MP3 player quietly, so it's not distracting the person next door, and let them have it. I mean, we have a student that won't get on the bus without his MP3 player because the bus is just horrific for him, socially and noisy. But he has his MP3 player on, he's got Metallica on, he loves that, that shuts out the world for him, and he sits there, he actually does a lot of his homework on the bus on the way home, so it's good. Sleep, again, consider background noise when they're trying to get to sleep. You might think you're being lovely and quiet around the house. One, they may not want that, so background noise, they put some white background noise on for them to listen to blank out other noises. But also, I went and visited a family a little while ago and they couldn't understand there's various reasons why this child wasn't sleeping. Most of it was sensory. Some of it was the Diet Coke an hour before bed, full of caffeine. That wasn't helping either. But also, he was woke up in the night and they couldn't work out why he woke up in the night. Dad was worked until middle of the night and crept in like a mouse, didn't make a sound, didn't flush the toilet. And I said, okay, just show me what he does. So he went in and he put the light on and I went, there we go. As soon as he put the light on, the fan came on. Now, they'd never even noticed that noise. But of course, this child had woken up to the fan going on every night. So we just cut the fan out and the Diet Coke and blocked the hole up in his door where the light was streaming through onto his bed, and he sleeps now. But just think about all those sort of noises. Some children can work with noise. My son can work with a computer, an iPad, a phone, and noise, and really does perform very well. I personally can't even reverse with the radio on in the car, so everyone's different, so just bear that in mind. Okay, now we're going to go on to the touch, or your tactile system. Again, a quote from Temple Grandin. I love Temple Grandin. Imagine trying to pay attention in the classroom, but you can't because the tags on your sweater felt like sandpaper scratching your neck. The seams on your socks feel like someone digging their fingernails into your feet. The routine jostling from your peers feels like someone punching you in the arm. How can you possibly concentrate? How can you? So this is what these children are feeling. Touch is obviously, the problem with touch is it is located on your skin. It is all over your body. You can't just put your hand over your ears to get rid of your touch. It's everywhere. And if you've got a sensitivity, it will cover your entire body inside and out. So mouth, inside, everywhere, and outside. And it's probably one of the hardest things, I think, especially for parents, because you'll find these children never wanted to be cuddled as babies. And so these parents, that's really distressing if your infant really repels from being cuddled. So it's a hard one, as we think it should be comforting, but actually it isn't. So a child that's hypersensitive, so is sensitive to touch, will find all sorts of things overwhelming, textures and everything else. So just bear in mind one thing here, that light touch is taken to the brain on a similar neural pathway as pain. So these children are finding that sort of light touch painful, properly painful, like sandpaper, like having your fingernails dug in. They're not just whining about something being a bit annoying. Deep pressure, deep touch is much more calming and soothing. So whenever we're touching our students, no little pats or strokes, deep pressure, really mean it, so they know you're there, and it's that deep pressure and touch. When students brush past each other, then a student just lashes out. That's just that fight or a flight response from the amygdala telling them that hurt, and that was just a response. On the other end of the scale, like all things, we have children that are under-responsive to touch. So they don't pick up on the cues. They need to touch everything and want to be touched and squeezed all day for their skin to feel normal. So what will you see? So again, as I said, throwing their arms back, not wanting to be picked up and cuddled as an infant or even, as a child. They'll keep a very large personal space away from others, and they won't want you coming into that personal space. Thank you very much. There'll be certain fabrics they will and won't wear. These are your tracksuit kids. You can forget jeans because they cut in quite nicely at the top and they won't want to be wearing any of those. These are the children that will spend half an hour in the morning making sure their socks are both at the same level, because otherwise it will drive them mad during the day. When we put our clothes on, and now I'm talking about it, you'll probably be able to feel where your clothes start and end on your body. But neurotypical population will habituate that. So after we've put our clothes on, we just forget that they're there. These kids never forget that they're there. They feel it on them all the time. So if they're at a different angle or they're a bit scratchy or this, they are really, really, really annoying for them. There'll be the kids that you see when they're in nursery and you give them a paintbrush and some paint, and they'll hold the paintbrush at the end like this. And they'll be doing a bit of this because they're not going to get messy because they don't want the touch or any feel of messy dough or paint or anything on their hands at all. It's painful, it's uncomfortable. They won't want to have their nails cut, their hair cut, their teeth brushed. So all grooming tasks are an absolute trauma for these children. And they will often react with a very negative, in our point of view, negative response. There'll be the children that wear what we class as inappropriate clothing for the weather. So there'll be children, I worked with a 16-year-old that went to Egypt and everywhere around the world because his family travelled a lot. And the whole time he wore long sleeve tracksuit, top and bottoms in 40 degrees heat because he was so frightened of the wind or something falling off or rain or anything touching his skin. He had to be covered from head to toe. We did something called the Wilbarger touch pressure protocol with him, which you need to get an OT to do, which is like a brushing and a joint compression program. He's fine now. But, you know, till he was 16, he was covered. And other children that just strip off completely. As soon as they get home, the uniform comes off. Or sometimes in school too, because they actually don't want to have that feeling. Shoes are a nightmare because they're really tight and uncomfortable and bulky and they never quite feel right. So often you find these children are barefoot. The other end of the scale are the children that crave touch. So they'll be the ones that are crashing into you, hugging you, wanting you to be there all the time, hiding under mattresses so they get that nice deep touch. And they may not always notice when they've cut themselves or hurt themselves because their skin's just not responding in the same way. What can we do for these kids? Okay, so massage and, as I said, deep pressure. That's the one thing you can do. Just give them, you know, a nice squeeze and deep pressure is very, very, very calming. Weighted blankets, lots of studies out there on weighted blankets. Lots of different types of weighted blankets out there. So find them again the right one for your student. There are weighted blankets that are made out of balls by a firm called Protac. Protac will let you borrow them for free. So Kingscraft Medical you need to get in contact with, and they will let you borrow weighted blankets, squeezy vests, weighted sort of squeezy chairs. They'll let everything free on trial. So just take advantage, get it in, then get every student to have a go. So they're the snuggly, couchy beanbags things. Weighted vests. I'm sure most of you have seen a weighted vest. This is an antique weighted vest because it's about 10 years old. It doesn't go on students anymore, so it's a bit old. But this is just a vest. Inside you've got little pockets and you put weights in. So again, it's giving you that deep, calming feeling. You can alter the weights. They're quite trendy now. They come in little like zip-up fleeces and all sorts of lovely weighted things now. But so they don't look. These ones look a little bit special, don't they? Really horrible. But yeah, they come in lots of cool colours and stuff now, so kids don't mind so much. Backpacks. A nice, easy way of doing it. And again, you're looking for that heavy pressure, that calming, grounding influence. So walking around with a backpack, 10% of the body weight is ideal because you don't want to encourage any back problems either. But if they can walk around with that, and we often set up little journeys for our students to do. So we'll ask them to go and take the books to so-and-so, who we know is at the other end of the school. And they'll go, oh great, why here? Can you take these ones back? Because they know if he's coming in with his backpack, he's about to have a meltdown and they need to give him some books to bring back. So teachers work together so that you can get these children moving and using those sort of strategies. I'm going to go on to this one, on this bit. We'll talk about this one in proprioception actually. Avoid situations where there is unexpected touch. If you know a student's going to react to being bumped or touched, put them at the beginning or the front of the line. Don't put them right in the middle where they're going to get jostled and bumped because that's going to annoy them and it might cause an incident. If they're a bit younger and you've got carpet time, which is always, no child sits still in carpet time on the floor. If you watch a mainstream school carpet time on the floor and they're in reception, they're all wiggle, 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 move, 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 pulling each other's hair and plaiting the one in front's hair and things like that. But if a child's finding that difficult, define their space a little bit more. Put them on a carpet tile, but don't just put that child on a carpet tile, put every child on a carpet tile so they all look the same. Or sit them in gym hoops, things like that. Just define their space for them a bit more. Seamless clothing is brilliant and a lot more available now than it used to be. So you can get clothing now that has no seams, so those seams don't annoy the kids. Parents can't afford seamless clothing. Socks seem to be the worst nightmare because they have that ridge inside the toe, don't they? Wear the socks inside out and the ridge is on the outside and it's not quite so annoying. Sensory smart kids, is this sensory smart? Smart knit kids. But anyway, Sensory Smart is the company. They do a whole range of seamless socks, seamless pants, seamless trousers, seamless everything. So if you've got a really sensitive child and a parent that wants to invest in some bits, this is a good thing to do. When I was in Lidl the other day, I found these, which I thought, well, these are great. These are diabetic socks. Has anybody ever heard of diabetic socks? I didn't know you could get diabetic socks. There was a new one to me. $1.99, and they don't have they have a tiny seam, but hardly at all on the toe, because of course, if you've got diabetes, you've got to worry about your feet, look after your feet, and things like that. So, diabetic socks, $1.99 in Lidl. Go and get them while you can, because they're a bargain. But they have very little seam on them. This is another. This can be used for proprioception or for children that are sensitive to touch, but again, that deep pressure, deep hug, we use compression vests. Now, compression vest, if you go out and buy a compression vest for a child, is about £80. And there's not many people that want to go out and just try that for £80 and if it doesn't work. So what we use these are like rugby skins. This is actually one of those ones that you wear in the summer to protect you from the sun, and those sort of suit things. I'll send it around, you can have a look. So this is one of those, and you just get this in a size slightly too small, and it will hug the child, and it actually calms one of my children down so much now that he's coping with school, and it's all because of one of these. It's brilliant. He now wears it to bed and everything. We're actually having a problem getting it off him now, so we might be working at the other end soon. So something like this, or the rugby skins, the things that go underneath the rugby kit. Again, JD Sports, Sports Direct, they'll sell them for like £3 or £4, which is brilliant. Or if you're lucky like me, every time your child grows out of one, you nick it for work, because it's one of my son's old ones. So pass it around and you can have a look. But nothing special, you can get it from anywhere. Again, we've talked about defining personal space. Privacy boards. Everybody seen privacy boards available for things LDA? Do them like a board that comes here and here. And you can use it for lots of reasons, but also children that don't want to be touched. That's my space, thank you very much, keep out of it, and then I'm happy and I can learn. If you're constantly worried that someone's going to bump you, touch you, you're not going to listen to the teacher, you're not going to learn, because you can't. Again, we've got my daughter actually, because they get used in everything, my poor kids, but she's got an angled work surface, so again, defining her space on the table. Deep pressure, as we talked about, is good for calming. And that also means oral deep pressure. How many of us chew our fingernails when we're anxious, chew ends of pens when we're either thinking or a little bit anxious about something? We all do it. It's all right, we all do it. So if you can provide another way of that child being able to chew, it will actually be calming. In the States, they did a program where they let children, mainstream children, chew chewing gum for exams. And they did lots of controlled studies on it, and all of those children that were allowed to chew chewing gum improved and performed better in public examinations because they were focused and calm. Chewing is calming. So, not chewing cuffs of school shirts and sweaters because that's annoying, so we find something else for them to chew that's appropriate. Some schools will allow chewing gum, and I think that's great if they do, absolutely brilliant. Some don't, and obviously dependent on the child, you're going to find the right chewy toy for them. So there's lots and lots and lots and lots available. This is like a chewy necklace. So for some of the girls, this one's quite cool. And they also do this one in like a dog tag for boys, army dog tag type one. And then you've got something called jewellery, which are like these, these things you have like on your key ring. They're just made out of proper rubber and plastic that hasn't got all the nasty chemicals in it. And they can just wear it as a bracelet, and then they can just chew on that rather than on themselves. And I do it in a necklace time as well. Most of you have probably seen things like the tri-chews, and they've got the T's and the P's, that sort of thing. As children get older, they don't really want to be using anything like this because it's not really very cool. So what I use for those children is this. I don't know if you can see it. It's like a very clear, just a clear plastic tube. That's all it is. You wouldn't believe how expensive this clear plastic tubing is. It's ridiculous. I have to import it from America because I can't find it anywhere in the UK. It's just a very specific grade of rubber. Then you just put it over the end of a pen or a pencil, and the child can chew away as much as they like. No one can really see it, so it's not visible, but it's safer than them chewing through 101 pencils a week. You can get 2 different grades. You can get this one, and you can get one that's slightly thicker as well. And what I do is I ask the teachers just to pop it off at the end of the week, stick it in some Milton over the weekend, and pop it back on again on Monday. That's all. I mean, you can't take it on and off every day. That wouldn't be practical. So those are brilliant. The only place I can find to really get them is in the States, as I said, from a place called National Autism Resources. If anybody finds this in the UK, please email me via that website on there, because they cost a fortune to import them. It's ridiculous. And they work really well. And again, we've talked about the therapeutic and the therapy techniques that you can use, but you would need an OT to show you how to do that. Okay, now we're on to your olfactory. So this is your sense of smell. So you may have heard, you may have been told that you stink by some of your students. Always nice to hear, especially when you thought you made an effort in the morning. I have students that will tell me when I've had my Indian takeaway, be that 3 days ago, and I'm thinking I really need to sort my oral hygiene out, but no, it's just the way it is. They have very sensitive smell. They won't use the toilets at schools. They can't use the toilet at school. It's not a case of them being fussy about the smell. They want you to go in and clean it. It will make them gag and vomit. The smell is too much. They will breathe through their mouth instead of their nose to try and reduce it. And there's certain environments that you won't get them to go to, like the farm, fishmongers, all those sort of places. It's too much. I think I can liken this to, does everybody know the store Lush? Yeah? Could you work in there all day? Yeah, I mean, Bluewater's my nearest shopping centre, and I can smell it kind of, you know, my sense to smell is pretty normal, and I can smell it coming down when I start turning the corner. So how are those girls working there all day? This is what our kids are dealing with all day, every day. Then you have your children that are undersensitive to smell. These are always interesting. So they will seek out the smells that they want, be that their own urine, or their own feces, or other people's armpits, or whatever. They will sniff people or objects. We had a little boy that sniffed quite a few people's armpits in Asda's a little while ago. That went down well. People were pretty good, I have to say. People were pretty good, but it was an interesting one. They don't mind the smell of their own bowel movement. Actually, they crave that smell. And they don't notice offensive smells. So often you'll find children that have had an accident and you think, whoa, they're not aware that they smell at all, because that's fine. And then you have your children that are overly sensitive to smell. So they are the children that, again, will avoid those situations and things like that. So what do we do for these kids? For the children that are undersensitive to smell, I'm rubbish at following these overhead, so I apologise. But we want to give them that smell that they're craving for in a more controlled environment, so that they're not going up to people in Asda's, grabbing their armpits and having a sniff. Hair sniffing is another really, really common one. Children will often sniff your hair to see whether they find you acceptable or not, or whether it's a comforting smell or not. We have a student that had a complete meltdown recently. No idea why. No idea. We just could not put our hand on it at all. This is a student that I see, not a Helen Allison. And we went through everything that we could possibly think of, you know, right back what was going on, what has changed. His mum had changed her shampoo, and that was it. So he was used to mum smelling like she was. She smelled differently, and he really couldn't hack it. Mum changed her shampoo back. She was quite annoying because she quite liked the new shampoo, and he was a lot calmer. And what we did to keep him calm during the day, because this anxiety had built up to such a level and it was taking a long time to bring it down, we just used one of these wristbands, And we put some of Mum's shampoo that he liked on that wristband. Then he could carry it around with him. And so we had it with him all the time, and he could just like, okay, I'm fine. And Mum, unfortunately for Mum, he's going to have to stick to the same shampoo for the rest of her life. Hopefully they won't change the concoction or the chemicals that they use in it, and it won't make it smell. But these are quite nice for putting smells on for children, either smells that they like so that they can then go into environments that are difficult for them, so they can just smell that, you know, if it's a nasty environment, they can smell that. Or for children that are really craving smells, you can put smells that aren't so pleasant on here. I know it's not great for everybody else around, but I'd much rather they were sniffing this than having their hands down their trousers and trying to grab other things to sniff. Now, talking of disgusting sniffy things, has anybody ever used stinky scratch and sniff stickers? Does anybody even know they existed? Brilliant, these are fantastic. These ones don't smell quite enough for me. My daughter recently, or a couple of years ago now, did a reading challenge at the local library. And every time they read 3 books, they got 3 stickers, and it all went on a little chart, and it was all lovely. And there was a vile smell in our dining room, and I thought, what is that smell? And I had everything out thinking, so the cat's done something somewhere and I haven't found it, so I'm like going around finding it. And I came to her chart, and I thought, it's the chart. Ooh, disgusting. One of the stickers was a rabbit poo. And so, and it stank. They all thought it was brilliant. And the kids loved it. And straight away I went into therapy mode and went, fantastic! They make stinky stickers, and they do. There they are. You can get them on Amazon. This is from a company called Peaceable Kingdom, and they do a variety of stinky scratch and sniff stickers. So if kids are craving disgusting smells, timetable it in. It's not a problem. Do this, then you can have your scratch and sniff time. Brilliant. The other thing we do a lot for children that are smearing and really getting a kick out of that is we use brown Play-Doh, and we put, there's a few aromatherapy oils that don't smell too great. Put that in there, bit of a farmyard smell in the brown Play-Doh, and actually over time that is reducing their smearing. I can see a lot of you going, oh, I don't want her coming to our school. But it's worked, it does really, really work. You can make your own smelly pots. You can buy smelly pots, but they're really expensive. You can make your own, just a little bit of cotton wool in a pot and a jam jar with a hole in the lid, and they can start smelling things like that. Aromatherapy, again, be careful, because some aromatherapy oils can be quite dangerous in certain situations, especially if you've got pregnant staff and things like that. But aromatherapy is a really good way of helping children get over certain smells or introducing them to new smells. As again, scratch and sniff, smelly pens, scented Play-Doh, all of that sort of stuff are brilliant. Really, really good for these kids, and quite easily available and readily available. We're going to go on to taste. So, how many of your students are on the beige diet? Yeah? Everything's beige. Normally just pretty plain. Not too crunchy, not too soft, just in the middle. Chicken nuggets, they're great, but only a specific type of chicken nuggets. Tesco's, not Sainsbury's. So these kids that are sensitive to taste are extremely sensitive to taste. And I'm not joking, they will tell the difference between different brands of chicken nuggets, and they will refuse to eat them, because to them they taste revolting. So they won't take certain foods because of tastes or textures. They will limit their diet, and they will often gag when they're told to eat a food they don't like. And if you look back at the developmental history, they probably haven't mouthed toys as a child either, because nothing is going in that mouth, thank you very much, if you've got a sensitivity in there. I worked with a paediatrician once in a feeding clinic. We fell out actually quite badly, because she said to me that no child will ever starve themselves. Rubbish. I have met quite a few children with autism that have ended up being tube fed because they will not eat. So it's a massive issue with our children. It's an emotive issue for parents and for students, other students, and for staff. Everybody wants to give their child a good nutrition. Everybody wants their child to eat. Everybody would like to go out to eat, or at least have their children eating the same dinner as the rest of the family. And sometimes it just doesn't happen for these kids. So any mouth work, teeth brushing or spoon eating or anything, is just no-go, because they have that sensitivity in the mouth. These children will like to eat one food at a time, never must they touch. Spaghetti bolognese in my house with my son has to be the spaghetti and the bolognese sauce. If they touch, he will eat it, but he's not keen. doesn't like them to be together. And these children will gag, and I can tell you, I don't know if any of you have actually properly gagged. Anyone here properly on food, almost to the point of almost choking, which these kids would have done. Once you've done that a couple of times, you're not going to want to eat that food again, because it is truly scary and truly unpleasant to gag on food. It's very distressing for the person that's gagging and the person that are watching as well. Even the thought of food time, so when it's coming close to dinner time, these kids will start to build their anxiety, especially if they've been in an environment where they've been force-fed. Now, it happens a lot, and most of the time it is just because people are so frightened of these children not eating. Once you start to force-feed a child that has a proper food anxiety, you're just going to have to go step right back again, start again. They won't chew or they'll drool all the time, so they've got very poor oral motor skills. And they will need to control the meal time completely as much as they possibly can. So I'm only eating from that plate with that knife, with that fork and that cup, because that gives me some control over the environment, which is understandable if they're that frightened. So what do we do? Food play, as an occupational therapist, is my absolute, I love it. Food play is a must with these kids, but can we not have food play at dinner time, in the dining hall, or anywhere where they're going to have any issues with actually having to eat the food? This is food play. This is to reduce the fear of food. It is not a pressure to put that in their mouth at all. If they do happen to eat a bit, brilliant. But that's not what it's there for. It's there to say, hey, this is okay, it's fun, it's not this big scary monster that your mind has made it out to be. Ensure that they have a good sitting posture. I went into a school for children, well, it was for children with autism, and the younger class, we were in the dining hall with the rest of the school, we're all sat up on car booster seats, wobbling about like this, no feet on the floor, high up in the air. And if you remember what we said at the beginning, 90% of these children also have a motor coordination problem. They need to be sat with their feet on the floor in a stable base position so that at least their posture is comfortable. They're not wobbling about trying to maintain their balance. Allow them to use their fingers to eat their food. Okay, it's not fantastic table manners, but I will be more concerned about the child eating than table manners at that stage. And take it really, really slow. Present foods one at a time if that's what they want. Pay attention to a temperature. So room temperature is one of the better temperatures to have. And look at food textures. Now the worst food texture that you could probably serve up is something called a mixed consistency texture. And this is where you've got a small lump of meat inside a gravy, because that is a nightmare if you've got any oral motor control problems, and also if you've got any sensitivity problems, because you're dealing with a mixture and oh, there's a lump, gag. So be very, very careful with the textures that you're using and introduce it really, really, really slowly. We've got a student at Helen Allison that was eating basically baked beans, that was it, he's 11. And we started introducing, with lots of food play, I'm there at lunchtimes doing lots and lots of stuff, and we introduce it slowly, slowly, slowly. 6 months down the line, he's eating half a sausage and a few other bits and pieces. Now, we're absolutely thrilled because he's starting to increase his diet, but it's taken 6 months of us working with him intensively to allow us, to trust us, to suggest that he might just try that little bit of sausage that's on his plate. So no pressure for these kids at all. When it comes to toothbrushing, you can actually use that as a way of desensitizing the mouth as well. Vibrating toothbrushes, they're a great way if you get the kids to play with them. Again, don't always have to have it with that horrible toothpaste that makes them gag. Watch out for toothpaste, because some of the really minty ones are really too strong for our kids. Go for one of the strawberry ones and things. But has anybody seen these? There's the Dentatrust ones, and there's also one called the Collis Curve. What you can come and have a look at it. Basically what it is you've got a line of bristles down the middle, like this, and then you've got bristles that come up like this around the edge. So one in, one out, the whole tooth's done. So none of this having to brush side, top thing, in and out, done. So for children that can bear it for a little bit, they're fantastic. Again, from the Sensory Smart store. Very, very good. And make sure you praise our kids when they've eaten, because to them it's a really big deal. Like I was saying about this little boy that's just started to eat his sausage. Really, really praise. Yes?
Some of our kids, is anybody into the extreme long distance walking, the toothbrushes that just slide on the end of your finger, way next to nothing?
Yeah.
They actually like that because it's their hand touching rather than
the control, isn't it?
Yeah. The control thing, and we've found that quite a lot of them will take up with that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Again, like, I don't know if anybody heard that. They're just little brushes that slip on your finger, and then if the child has that control, you haven't got the great big part of the brush coming in. They've got their own finger, so they're giving much more control over what they're doing in their mouth. That's brilliant. Okay. Where do you get those from?
Most of the walking shops do them because these people are really mad about mountain climbing and want to carry the absolute minimum weight.
There you go. It's like my diabetic socks, you see, just don't know where you're going to find things. Okay, proprioceptive system. So this is our sense of where we are in space. This was how we know where our body is without us looking where it is. Proprioceptors are located in the muscles and the joints, and every time we move, they fire to the brain to say, hey, my arms are here, my legs are here, I know where I am in space. Anybody's ever woken up with a dead arm, you know what poor proprioception feels like, because you don't quite know where your arm is without looking at it. Well, some of our kids, their whole body feels like that. They can't judge direction, they can't judge force or speed or strength, all that sort of stuff, because they have to watch everything and everything's not quite working the way they want it to. So it just takes away their confidence, and I think this is children who've got problems in their proprioception often knocks their self-esteem quite a bit because they really don't know their own strength, and they can hurt without realising they've hurt people, they'll be tripping over, that sort of thing. So there'll be the children that pull, twist and chew at everything, including their shirts and their pencils. They'll break toys without even meaning to. I mean, we've got a little boy that just everything he picks up just seems to fall apart because he picks it up with such a grip. He doesn't mean to, but it's just the way his body's telling him to do it. They'll often crash or trip over objects. There'll be the children that you often see on the perimeter of the playground, so they're kind of touching the perimeter of the playground or the walls, especially in busy corridors. They'll be kind of hugging the walls as they go along. Again, it's giving them that reference to where their body is in space. They will seem to constantly physically tackle everything. They will often stand too close to others when they're talking. They will fidget. They will walk a bit uncoordinated, click their fingers, all that sort of stuff. And they will be our fidgety kids. So these are the kids that are constantly doing this on the chair because they're firing off their proprioceptors all the time to let them know where their body is in space. And what I would say is, annoying as that may be as a teacher, if these children are not allowed to move and fidget, they will not be able to concentrate, because if they're told to sit still, their entire concentration will be taken up on, I must sit still, I must not fall off this chair. That's all they'll be able to think about, because they need to fidget to know where they are in space. So what can we do for these kids? As you'll see, a lot of these are very similar to the tactile strategies. Steamroller. I think when I first walked into Helen Allison, they'd never had an occupational therapist before, and I was getting them to lie children down and roll over them with big heavy balls and things like that, and they don't think, I know, they thought I was crazy, until they started to see some of the effects that it was having on the children. By doing things like that, you're alerting them to where their body is in space, and again, deep pressure is calming. So the bear hugs. The bear hugs are kind of like a vest that you put on and you pull it very tight. Again, we're using those vests that's going around somewhere, the lycra vests, instead of those, because the bear hugs are really, really expensive. Swimming's a good activity because you're pulling against something so you know where your body is in space. Blowing, oral, calming, again. Weighted vest, weighted backpacks, and weighted pencils and cutlery as well to help them know where they are. One of the most important things though for these kids is allowing that movement. So, this is where, as teachers, it can be a bit tricky because you've got 4 of them fidgeting, but send these kids off on errands, get them walking up and down stairs to other people in the building with little notes, things like that, get them moving. Movement breaks are essential. Now, when you say movement breaks, what I don't like is just them being let out in the playground and then that's it, they can run about or do what they like and come back in. Structured movement breaks are much more effective. So doing an activity for 1 to 2 minutes at a time is much more effective than just letting them run and come back. If you haven't got the staff to be with them, letting them run and come back is okay. But if you can get them to do things like star jumps or cross crawls where they're moving, and really getting themselves going, in between activities where we ask them to sit down, you will get a much better concentration. I actually think that goes for all primary school children, not just children with autism, that you need to infiltrate movement breaks in throughout the day. Different types of seating are out there, and they are very, very effective. This one is a vibrating cushion, which will work beautifully in a classroom if you haven't got anybody with a low frequency sound sensitivity, because they'll want to throw this out the window as soon as the child sits on it. So be a bit careful there. What we tend to use are the wobble cushions, so they're sort of like blow-up cushions. You can get them off Amazon, cheaper off Amazon than anywhere else. I think they call them balance cushions there. What they're actually for is balancing on one foot and getting your ankles strong for things like skiing. So one of those blow-up cushions. And then we use ball chairs. Has everybody seen a ball chair? It is a ball, just a normal gym ball, big one. And it sits on little legs which have got brakes on them. Now, Asda's were doing those a little while ago for back care for £30, £40, so we bought loads of those. But there you can buy them in the specialist catalogues as well. And the one that's my favourite at the moment is the Hokey stool, which is Hokki. Again, I think it's King's Craft Medical that you can get this from too. And that is like a stool, looks a bit like a bar stool, so it's kind of round at the top and it comes down like this and just sits. And the bottom's slightly rounded, so you can sit on it and you can move, and it just moves. It allows that fidgety movement to allow that concentration. What I found these brilliant for is the older students. So the older students who you're not going to get on a wobble cushion, you're certainly not going to get them on a ball chair, they're okay. Because you can get them in grey and black, and they don't really stand out, and they're okay, they're acceptable. I've got a student on one at the moment who would not have accepted it at all from me, but he thinks he's doing some research for me. So every now and again I walk in with a little questionnaire for him, and he fills it in about how the stool's helping him concentrate and focus. And so he thinks he's doing a research. He's not doing a research project for me at all. It just gets filed away afterwards, but he thinks he is, and then we talk about it. And actually, I say he's not doing a research project for me. He is, really, because I'm getting his personal experience of how that stool's working for him. Nobody else is allowed to sit on that stool, and it's certainly not going to be allowed to be taken out of the classroom because he's doing research for Corinna. Okay, it works, and it's brilliant. So look up the Hokey stools, they're really, really, really nice. The other thing that you can use is TheraBand, available everywhere, because it's a very cool gym thing, isn't it, at the moment, to have your TheraBand. Big elastic band. So again, any movement breaks you can use this, because it's pulling against pressure, calming, again, deep pressure is calming. But what I also do with this, get a thicker grade than this is too thin. We get a thicker grade than this, they all come in different grades. Tie it around the legs of a chair, and then the kids can just kick against it. And it just gives them that movement that they want, so they're just kicking against the band. If you do it with a thin grade of band like this, you'll get this all day. And that will drive you insane, and everybody else. So get a thicker band, and they can just kick against it. Really cheap alternative of making a fidget chair, basically. Okay, the movement, the vestibular system. We've got 20 minutes. Okay, the vestibular system is our movement sensor. So where we are against gravity. It controls gross motor, it controls fine motor. It's located in your inner ear, and it will detect rotatory movement and linear movement, which is on one plane. The two differences between the two, just a little thing to try and remember again, is linear, so in one way, be that up and down, backwards and forwards. Linear movement is calming. Rotatory movement is alerting. That's the basic rule. However, some children will need to do alerting movement to be focused. So again, you need to know your students really well. What might you notice with these kids? They'll be the thrill seekers, children that are under responsive to vestibular. So they'll be jumping up, or jumping off high things. They'll be the ones at the top of the playground, on top of the climbing frame, right at the top, just jumping off, and your heart's in your mouth, but they seem to manage it every time absolutely fine. Those are those sort of kids. Again, your fidgety kids, clumsy kids, and your basically uncoordinated kids. On the other side of it, you'll have the children that are the non-alert kids, so those ones that are just sort of flopped out on the table, and they'll lean, and they can't seem to sit upright against gravity because it's your gravity sense. These children will often be the ones that have movement or motion sickness. Again, very common. If you have a middle ear infection, you get balance problems and motion sickness. But these children have got a sensory problem in their vestibular system. And they'll often lose their balance if they're trying to ride a bike or roller skates. All that sort of stuff becomes very, very difficult. And the vestibular system is where we see a lot of the motor coordination difficulties, which is where the other side of the therapy would come in. So what can you do for these kids? Children who are over-responsive to movement and are frightened of movement, even lifting their foot up a pavement, to them can be really, really stressful, because again, that's that movement, and they're not being able to quite judge where they're going, like a perceptual judgment. So limit unnecessary movement, introduce it slowly, but go back to what we've talked about over and over again. Use sanctuaries for calming, and use deep pressure calming techniques like the massage and the hug vest and all that sort of stuff throughout the day to make their systems regulated, so that actually the movement isn't quite so horrific for them. For children that are absolutely petrified of movement, you are better to seek a sort of therapy advice, because we can work on them on balls and on swings and things like that. And those that require increased vestibular movement, again, you can see quite a few similarities coming out here. Movement breaks are really important for these children. Alternative seating is really important for these children. Chair push-ups, sometimes when you just sit on your chair, I can't do them because I've got really weak arms, but they're pushing up on the chair. If there's one piece of equipment, you can afford one piece of equipment, get a gym ball, because you can do so much with a gym ball. You can use it for fidgety seating, you can use it to roll over kids to calm them down, you can use it like this so they're actually working on their shoulder stability, and again, but getting that vestibular movement. The ones that are peanut shaped, like monkey nut shaped, they're a bit better because they're a bit more stable if you're working on your own. These are a bit difficult to work with a child all over the place. I mean, I can do it, but it's years of experience of knowing exactly where to put myself so I can then work with the child. But the peanut ones are a bit easier. And a very, very simple strategy for children that are very anxious and very stressed, and it does work very well. Have them lying over the peanut ball and just rocking them backwards and forwards over that peanut ball for 5 minutes. It will seem like forever, and they won't do it for 5 minutes to start with. It's very, very calming, and that calming can last for hours. In the same way as if we get unregulated, that can last for hours too. Swings and roundabouts and things like that, all that sort of stuff, that they're craving that movement, we'll let them have it, because the children that crave it will need it to be focused. They're not just fidgeting to be annoying. Okay. Lastly, we've got the visual sense. And again, another quote by Temple Grandin. Imagine sitting in the class and trying to pay attention, but your eyes hurt because it feels like there's a bright floodlight being shone in your eyes. Now, as you feel a headache building, the teacher is telling you to pay attention. And that's what it's like. And I think in this room, you can see something already that would annoy anybody with any visual sensitivity in the carpet. Things like this carpet are just, as soon as I walked into the building, I just thought, oh no, they are just awful. And we had a sensory conference in London a little while ago, about a month ago. And we had somebody there that is, I don't know if you've seen them, the OMIs, they're like a on the floor computer mat type thing, and children can go and touch, it's like a touch screen, but it's on the floor and they touch it, and it is absolutely gorgeous resource. But we had a lot of adults with autism there who couldn't actually come in till they turned that off because they couldn't walk over it. And you often see that in like big shopping centres, they have those things illuminated on the floor. So, you know, visual senses is a difficult one. So what will you see? You'll have the children that are craving visual, so they're the children that will do lots of craving stimming, lots of lovely, watching lots of spinning things. And you'll have the other children that want to wear sunglasses, will be completely disorganised, will have difficulties with reading. They will won't be able to read body language, no eye contact, blah, 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 blah. It's all written there. Eye contact is a bit of a bugbear. I know everybody says, oh, you know, you must get eye contact. Well, no, actually, you mustn't always get eye contact, because if you actually talk to anybody with autism that has a visual sensitivity, demanding eye contact is painful. They may see a complete pixelated picture, not what you think they're going to be looking at, and they'll be so involved in trying to cope with that, they're not going to be able to listen to the conversation. So rather than actually demanding eye contact, what it's best to do is, you know, you obviously want the student to give you some idea that you know it's them that you're talking to, so you're getting the interaction. But please don't make them stare at you and talk to you, because we don't do that as neurotypical human beings, and actually it can be very uncomfortable for these children. So what can we do? Okay, don't demand eye contact. Minimise visual stimulation for the child. These days we seem to have gone over into schools these sort of shiny flat plastic desks in most rooms where everything shines off of. I think it's getting better. They're coming more and more, coming a bit more matte now. But when the light comes in from the window onto those desks, it can reflect quite a lot. So what we use is like a matte angled desk surface. Again, it just takes the glare off the desk, and it might allow that student to actually be able to read what's on the paper in front of them. Natural lighting wherever possible, not carpets like this. Letting them wear sunglasses, letting them wear caps, slanted writing slopes. Frequent breaks, again, frequent breaks, because it can be very, very tiring if you're getting visual stress. Tinted overlays are brilliant, I have to say. We use them a lot. We use reading rulers, which is just a little bit of the colour. We've got a little pack where we can test what colour's best for that child. We're not experts in it, so we will just, and if we really think that's working, we will then suggest that the parents go off and get a proper assessment. When they're working on the computer, I don't know if anybody ever even knew that you can change the background on a computer, so you haven't got to work on a white computer screen. All Word programs, you can do it, you just go into format, change background colour. So put that on buff straight away, and it will take off that glare on the computer screen. That absolutely makes a huge, huge, huge difference to it. Natural lighting is a difficult one, especially in schools, but as much as possible try and avoid the flicky lights. And try, if you can, to think a little bit about yourself when you're in school. I made an absolute faux pas about 3 years ago. I went into a school and I was wearing a checked shirt, which I never do for work. And I don't know why, it must have been just what happened to be ironed and it was in ready. So I grabbed it, went to work, and then I realised where I was going, and it was in a school for children with autism. And it made a real difference. The children that normally would come up and interact with me were just like, whoa, and I could see why, because it was horrific, actually, I have to say. So just think about your own presentation when you're working with kids. Plain, I mean, we've got purple shirts when we work in the National Autistic Society schools, but just plain, try not to make it too patterned, too overwhelming. Same goes for when we look back at things like the smell and things like that. Try not to use too perfumed shower gels and all that sort of stuff that might be overwhelming for our children. Just bear that in mind. We might, think we look and smell gorgeous, but to them it's too much. If a child is understimulated, this could overstimulate most kids, I have to say, just consider your teaching again. Look at the background colours on your computer, on your whiteboards. I don't think anybody uses a blackboard anymore, except for OTs, because it's really good for hand-eye coordination. And things like this, different colours with different lines, will just help break up and get them to come back to the place that they'd left off. Yep.
Especially for any words of wisdom when you're going to get Ofsted and you need to have lots of bright displays that involve lots of colours and everything compared. I
wouldn't. And then I'd explain to Ofsted why they weren't there. We try and keep things very much one background colour, one border colour. So although you might have lots of displays, make sure you've got some consistency on the background colour and the border colour. They're not all different. And just keep it to a minimum. I do say keep it to a minimum. And if Ofsted say, well, you haven't got much up, and you can say, well, that's because we're working with children with autism, and that will be overwhelming. Just refer them back to spell and teach and all those sort of things that I don't pander to Ofsted, I have to say, sorry. But I'll happily tell them why.
Just something related that I've done on a different issue, but written to Ofsted in advance, saying that these are the things we're thinking, then at least if the inspector challenges you, you've got a letter from Ofsted either saying we agree with your idea or not.
If they're coming into a school that's specifically for children with autism, you would hope that they would think that was a good thing, that you've got minimum distraction. You would hope that, but I would make sure you get that in there, or whoever speaks to the Ofsted says, we'd just like to alert you to the fact that this is why.
No, up to you. We've been officers recently, and we still see quite a gap seeing what the expectations in the classroom were, and us trying to defend ourselves, the situation. But even think little bits like that, it's extra things now and again to be able to sort of.
Yeah, no, do, and just ask.
Other professionals have said.
Yeah, or get them to speak to someone on the NAS helpline if they don't want to hear it from you, or me. Come to me. I'll happy to talk to them. Okay. This is just something that I put together. You all know what you want in your own classrooms, but if you can get 3 things in your classrooms, if you can get a little sanctuary area for all your students for when they're having an absolute meltdown, if you can get some sort of sensory treasure chest, so a box with a few toys in it, like squeezy toys, pully toys. The pound shops are brilliant for all this sort of stuff. Just go around there and grab what you can. Hawkins Bazaar is another really good place for fiddly things. This is a Hawkins Bazaar fiddly thing, lovely, really, really good. These are great too for kids that fiddle. These just go up and down on the pencils. These are from TTS Special Direct. They're literally so the kids can just fiddle with them up and down on the pencils. Have a little resource that the children can come and choose what they want, because they'll know what they need. And I think that's what we need to remember, is our students teach us all the way. They're out there jumping on the trampoline all day. They're telling us that they're craving vestibular proprioceptive movement. So watch them. They're telling you what they need. Their behaviour is telling you what they need. This is just like old CDs that you can have for spinning, and glitter jars are brilliant. Has anybody seen the tornado tube inserts? So you get 2 empty Coke bottles, and Hawkins Bazaar and online you get this little tornado tube. You put water and lots of glitter in, and you turn it upside down and it just whirls around like a tornado and comes into the bottom below. I love them. And I have to say they're probably the most popular toy in our school, and they are literally 3 Coke bottles and a £3 tornado tube. Absolutely brilliant. That gives you some ideas. There's a few resources there that you guys might want to go if you want to do any further reading on. And a little plug for me at the top. The NAS are actually publishing my book, Sensory Strategies. It should be out by the end of this month, if not by January. And it basically is just an expansion on what we've talked about today. If anybody wants me to let them know when it's out, it's a sign-up list down there. Just pop your email on there and I'll let you know. But the NAS, as I said, are publishing it, so it should be out and about. Now, I quickly want to come back to the group discussion you guys had earlier. And thank you for those people that have offered strategies already. That's brilliant. Is there anything that anybody talked about in their group that we haven't covered that they could offer up as a strategy for everybody that we haven't discussed? Anything we have? Yep, great. Yep.
I have heard that there are people working with yoga.
Yep, we work with yoga.
Is that something you use?
Yes, we do. I mean, I'm not a yoga teacher, and I would never sort of say I was, but we do use relaxation techniques, and we do use some yoga poses like the cat and the dog pose, which are for breathing in and out for some of our students that are really, really anxious. And we use a lot of the sort of in and out breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. 1, 2, 3. We use that, and one student we have works on a program like that, and he has that twice a day. So he has the relaxation where you squeeze and release every muscle, and the breathing, and twice a day. It really keeps his anxiety level. So yes, yoga is fantastic. Very good resource.
Google yoga for kids.
Yep.
Obviously it depends on the age group, but at the moment I've noticed with a few of mine yoga really helps. So we've been doing a couple of PE sessions on yoga, and there's a brilliant program that's just free on YouTube.
Brilliant.
Lady just standing there talking through a story. It's got the angry cat and the breathing. It talks them through a whole story.
Fantastic.
And it's a whole, sort of 20-minute yoga session, but there are about
Brilliant.
8 or 9 of them.
That's good. That's yoga for kids on YouTube. Apparently, it just talks you through it. So that's really good. Thank you for that. Anything else anybody wanted to share that they've used that really works that we can use as another resource? Or any particular questions now that you wanted to ask about students you're working with, or yep.
I heard Paul Isaac speak recently, some of you may know, and he talked about not being able to recognise faces, they're just pixelated.
Yeah.
And as a young boy, he used to recognise people by touch.
Yep.
And he also said some people do recognise them by smelling.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to know what you felt about, say, don't smell me, smell this, because it may be the way that they're identifying.
Absolutely, and I think that's why it's so important to know your students. Are they doing it because they need to crave that smell, so they're just smelling everything, or is it what you're saying, that they're using that as their reference base to that person, in which case absolutely fine. I heard him speak too, and he was saying that colours and things like that it was amazing to hear him, and he wears the tinted lenses, and without those, you know, he finds life very, very difficult. So yeah, no, whatever Glenys is saying, absolutely. If they're using it as an identification, that's absolutely fine. But when we step in is when they're just sniffing everything, everyone, and it's interfering with their learning, really.
Just the other thing about not changing, children who don't have trouble with face recognition, not doing dramatic changes to hairstyle and things.
That's really hard, isn't it? It is really hard.
Parents talk to me about how they can't.
Yeah, they can't change their hairstyle. That is hard. And it's, you know, we've got staff that go from blonde to dark hair overnight and think, the students can't recognise who they are. But yeah, absolutely. Keep things the same. Yeah.
You talked about the frequency of autistic children having sensory differences.
Yeah.
How often do you get sensory differences in children that are not autistic?
Quite common. Sensory processing disorder is being much more recognised now in the general population. Controversially, I think if you do see a child with sensory processing disorder, you can often see a few autistic type traits coming through. But there are children out there that have a pure sensory processing disorder, say they have an oversensitivity to tactile, to touch, that we treat, and once we've treated that, then no more is a problem. So yeah, but sensory processing disorder is becoming a recognised diagnostic condition. There was another hand. Was there another hand? Any more hands?
Yeah, sorry, we've got an individual who induces vomit. Have you got any coping mechanisms around that? Obviously, it's about his health needs and stuff.
Why does he do it?
We're not entirely sure.
How does it do it? What does any triggers? Do you need?
It's around food, and it seems to be going
Okay.
on mood. Certain types of vomit feel be quite low and not interested in food, and then he becomes quite angry and excited by food. And it's once he's eating, he'll induce vomit and really clear.
Lovely.
Yes.
That's a really difficult. I mean, that's something I'd like to see and actually go into a bit more detail. It could be sensory based. It could be, I don't know, a behavioural thing. That's how I wouldn't like to say exactly why he's doing that. It would concern me a little bit, I have to say. And I'd like to find out what foods. Was it particular foods? Was it particular? And it's nothing particular that makes him do it. No particular meal time. Does it all dinner times? Every single meal time?
Not every meal time, but he as I say, he'll go through patterns throughout the month. He'll have low periods where he's
Not doing it.
Then he'll have heightened times where he's doing it several times, but more than several times, 17 times.
Right. I don't know without seeing him, sorry. That's a really difficult one, but yeah. Don't know if anybody else has got any ideas of why he might be doing that.
We had a student like that, but with him it was more a control thing. It was to do with if he was trying to either avoid a lesson that he'd got to come, whether it be after lunch or after break or whatever it was, because he knew that by forcing himself to be sick, and he could do it plenty of times, it was avoiding a situation that was causing a great deal of anxiety. And to start with, we'd phone mum and he'd go home and whatever, and then we got to realise the pattern and work through that. So it could be a behavioural thing, but that's only from my experience.
That's what I say. You think I would write down and start making a diary of that, and then sit down with lots of you. Go, right, what happened? What, was there maybe a lesson afterwards? Was it a particular food? Was he craving a different type of food that day? Did he know that's the food he was going to get? I mean, do you do visual stuff to let them choose their own food? All that sort of stuff, and then have a little sort of rethink once you've written everything down. Not easy. Yeah. Always complex.